What if I told you that the greatest dramas of the 19th century unfolded not on the theater stage, but in the silence of closed bedrooms? The luxurious mansions of the Gilded Age hid thousands of invisible female tears behind their marble facades. Wealth dictated cruel rules, turning the lives of the inhabitants of these palaces into a series of endless restrictions. Maids became silent witnesses to the fading youth and broken destinies of their mistresses. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn why huge halls became a golden cage for the most privileged women. The hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about lies in the architecture of these magnificent historic buildings. The maids moved around the house through a complex system of secret corridors and hidden steep staircases. This layout was designed specifically to prevent accidental encounters between the masters and the servants. The narrow, dark passageways stood in stark contrast to the huge, bright rooms of the owners of the luxurious mansion. This spatial division emphasized the insurmountable gulf between the two worlds of women living under the same roof. The relationship between maids and mistresses often resembled a complex, intense psychological dance. The maids knew absolutely everything about their mistresses' secret anxieties and hidden habits. They helped the ladies dress, combed their hair, and prepared their bedrooms for bedtime. In moments of intimate closeness, some of the social boundaries between representatives of different classes were blurred. The mistresses sometimes confided in their maids' thoughts that they hid even from their own husbands. Wealthy women were under tremendous pressure from the strict social expectations of their narrow circle. They were required to look impeccable and constantly organize lavish, exhausting evening receptions. Particular attention was paid to the careful maintenance of the vast wardrobes of wealthy and noble ladies. Complex silk dresses required daily cleaning, delicate ironing, and minor repairs. Maids spent long hours in special rooms filled with hot and very humid steam. They carefully smoothed out delicate lace and sewed on tiny loose pearl beads. The process of caring for these items became a kind of ritual of worship of completely inaccessible luxury. The hidden life of huge mansions concealed many untold, quiet, and sad women's stories. Each massive door hid personal fears, bitter disappointments, and unfulfilled bold hopes. The maids carried these heavy secrets with them, leaving behind perfectly clean rooms. The invisible labor of the servants served as a solid foundation for maintaining the glittering facade of an entire era. I would be very interested to hear your thoughts on this topic in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. What I am about to show you is forbidden to discuss in polite society. In many luxurious mansions, there were rooms whose doors always remained tightly closed. These rooms held memories of family secrets, failed marriages, or distant relatives who had passed away. Maids were strictly forbidden from even approaching these mysterious parts of the huge house. The silence of the East Wing frightened the young maids more than the strict and cold anger of the mistress. The interiors of the locked rooms remained untouched for many, many years. The furniture stood under thick white covers, resembling strange frozen white figures. Dust slowly settled on the luxurious carpets, creating an atmosphere of absolute and impenetrable oblivion. The air in such rooms became heavy and incredibly stagnant from the long absence of ventilation. The maids whispered about the reasons why the owners had ordered these tall doors to be closed forever. Some rooms were closed due to deep mourning for the untimely departed members of a wealthy family. The era dictated strict and lengthy rituals of mourning for loved ones and dear people. The mistress could order the room to be left as it had always been. The belongings of the departed person became untouchable relics, covered with a layer of heavy gray dust. Life in the house continued, but these rooms remained monuments to a frozen past. Sometimes the reason for the isolation of rooms was the serious financial difficulties of a wealthy and influential family. Maintaining a huge mansion required enormous financial costs for heating and lighting the premises. The owners secretly closed entire floors to save on expensive coal and servants. The exterior facade continued to shine with splendor, hiding the slow internal ruin of a famous dynasty. The maids were the first to see this quiet decline, but they were obliged to maintain absolute silence. Each locked door was a silent witness to someone's untold personal drama. The secrets of the past were reliably guarded by strict rules and the strong fear of dismissal of the servants. The age of splendor demanded a perfect image, forever erasing any signs of human weakness. How difficult do you think it was to keep other people's secrets your whole life? In the next chapter, you will learn how maids coped with severe emotional burnout. A secret passed down from generation to generation is hidden in simple everyday household rituals. Maids were not just ordinary cleaners, they became confidants to their noble mistresses. They knew which letters their mistress burned in the fireplace on long, dreary winter evenings. They saw bitter tears, carefully washed away with cold water before going out in public. This invisible, strong bond between women of different social classes was built on a mutual understanding of vulnerability. The morning toilet of a rich and influential lady took several hours and required incredible patience. The maid carefully laced up the corset, which physically squeezed the body and restricted breathing. This process symbolized the rigid framework into which conservative society forced women. The mistress silently endured the discomfort, understanding that beauty required constant and difficult physical sacrifices. The maid sympathized with her, tightening the long laces with the utmost care and sincere concern. Letters and short notes left on the dressing table often revealed deep personal secrets. The maids knew how to discreetly move the papers without reading their contents aloud in front of their mistress. They knew the handwriting of unwanted secret admirers or strict relatives bringing bad news. From the expression on their mistress's face during long reading sessions, they understood the seriousness of the situation. Their main task was to ensure absolute peace and protect their mistress from unnecessary strong emotions. Often, loyal maids witnessed the cold and distant relationship between wealthy spouses. They saw how husband and wife communicated exclusively in formal and very rehearsed phrases. The spouses' bedrooms were often located at completely opposite ends of the huge and cold, luxurious mansion. The maid understood perfectly well that wealth did not guarantee simple female happiness and love. This realization helped them to endure their own life difficulties and misfortunes much more easily. The story of this complex relationship remained forever hidden behind thick velvet window curtains. They shared the same fears in a world ruled exclusively by strict men. Their silent union was a form of quiet resistance to the cruel rules of high society. These invisible threads bound the inhabitants of these huge houses more tightly than any blood ties. Please like this video if you were touched by the devotion of these amazing women. What happens behind the closed doors of formal halls changes all established ideas. Dining rooms in luxurious mansions resembled real theatrical stages for displaying enormous wealth. Long mahogany tables were set with the finest delicate porcelain and heavy family silver. Every meal became a very complex ritual with dozens of strict and unbreakable rules. Women brilliantly played the roles of gracious hostesses, hiding their exhaustion behind polite smiles. Preparations for a lavish dinner party began several days before the grand event. Maids spent hours polishing silver cutlery to a dazzling mirror shine in special rooms. They carefully ironed huge snow-white tablecloths, making sure there were no wrinkles. The arrangement of glasses and plates required mathematical precision and perfect eye measurement from the tired servants. A mistake in serving could be a reason for a serious scandal and immediate severe reprimand. Conversations at the large table always concerned only safe and socially acceptable topics. Politics, finance, and genuine feelings were considered unacceptable for discussion in mixed company. However, this same light mercilessly exposed the incredible fatigue and pallor of the women present. The heat from the burning candles made the air in the room stuffy and very difficult to breathe. The maids quietly opened the windows to let in some fresh, life-saving night air. The end of the lavish dinner brought no long-awaited relief to either the hostesses or the exhausted servants. The guests slowly moved to the living rooms for card games and long, boring social conversations. The women continued to play their roles flawlessly, smiling at people they often secretly despised. The maids immediately set about cleaning the dining room, carefully gathering the fragile porcelain and expensive silverware. Their long working day continued well past midnight, depriving them of the necessary hours of healthy sleep. The cold reception rooms held memories of hundreds of empty conversations and fake sincere smiles. Real life unfolded far from the reception rooms, in the silence of closed, dark bedrooms. How much do you think these dinners exhausted the psyche of all those involved? In the next chapter, you will learn what heavy secret the massive velvet curtains concealed. The interiors of the Age of Splendor were characterized by an abundance of heavy fabrics and dark, solid wood. The windows were securely covered with multi-layered velvet curtains that almost completely blocked out the sunlight. This drapery created a strange feeling of constant twilight in the huge rooms of the luxurious brick mansion. The air was saturated with the specific smell of expensive dust and old wood, becoming incredibly still. The maids spent long hours cleaning these massive fabrics. The lack of sunlight had an extremely negative effect on the health and mood of the inhabitants of the huge house. Pale skin was considered the main sign of aristocracy, but it often hid real deep physical weakness. Women spent long days in semi-darkness, reading books or doing small handicrafts. Windows were rarely opened wide to keep out street noise and dirty air. The mansion slowly turned into an airtight capsule, securely isolated from the real bustling city life. The windows were finally opened, letting the fresh spring breeze and sunshine into the stuffy house. It was a time of brief, joyful renewal, which was incredibly quickly replaced by the usual routine and boredom. The lingering smell of mothballs used to preserve fabrics haunted the maids throughout the huge house. It clung to their uniforms and hair, reminding them of their constant work. Fighting the voracious moths was an important task, on whose success the preservation of the household's belongings depended. A damaged, expensive curtain could cause a loud scandal and the unfair dismissal of an inexperienced maid. Responsibility for enormous material values created additional powerful nervous tension for all the servants. In the evenings, long curtains were drawn tightly, completely cutting off the house from the vast outside world. Gas wall lamps were lit, casting bizarre, flickering shadows on the tall, dark walls. The atmosphere became extremely oppressive, forcing the weary women to seek refuge in early sleep. The bedrooms quickly became the only safe havens where they could be completely alone. But even there, they were constantly haunted by a feeling of complete isolation and the utter hopelessness of their situation. Every deep fold in the fabric held the memory of long hours of women's agonizing loneliness. The heaviness of the dusty curtains reflected the weight of social conventions that weighed heavily on fragile female shoulders. The Age of Splendor created the perfect gloomy backdrop for tragedies unfolding in absolute silence. The interiors of these historic mansions still capture the imagination, hiding human pain behind their beauty. Their high walls remember the breath of women whose names have been lost forever in the shadows of history. This is what happens behind closed bedroom doors just before the early cold dawn. A long day in the mansion began long before the first rays of sunlight illuminated the facade. The maids woke up in unheated rooms in the attic, barely distinguishing old objects in the dark. They dressed incredibly quickly, their teeth chattering from the morning chill that permeated the old brick house. Their personal morning rituals were kept to a minimum so as not to waste precious working minutes. The first difficult task was to light the fireplaces in the formal halls and bedrooms of the noble masters. The maids carried incredibly heavy buckets of coal up narrow and steep wooden service staircases. Black ash stained their hands and faces, requiring constant monitoring of the cleanliness of their strict uniforms. The fire had to be burning brightly just in time for the awakening of the fastidious and very capricious mistress. Warmth was an exclusive privilege of the rich, while the servants were constantly and severely cold. Late evening brought with it new responsibilities and completely different, darker, more anxious moods. After the end of lavish dinner parties, the maids helped their mistresses prepare for a long night's sleep. Stiff corsets were unlaced, freeing incredibly tired bodies from hours of intense physical pressure. Heavy family jewelry was removed and carefully locked away in sturdy metal safes until morning. Makeup was completely washed off, leaving only traces of intense fatigue and the years lived on their faces. The constant morning rituals and evening fears locked these women's lives into an endless, monotonous cycle. Identical days merged into weeks, and weeks into years, without bringing any significant changes. Beauty and youth faded away, leaving only a habit of constant submission and strict discipline. The house mercilessly took away their strength, offering only a temporary and very illusory safe haven in return. This endless cycle created a feeling of complete hopelessness in a world where incredible wealth reigned. At dawn, all fears were carefully hidden deep inside, and the game of perfect life continued. The familiar masks were put on again, and the women went out to meet a new day full of strict restrictions. What do you think gave them the strength to continue this endless performance every day? In the next chapter, we will talk about how an impeccable reputation controlled the complex destinies of women. In the age of splendor, a woman's reputation was her most valuable and, at the same time, most fragile asset. One careless word or glance could forever close the doors to high society. The mistresses of luxurious mansions lived in constant fear of making a mistake and disgracing their influential families. This intense fear dictated their every move, their choice of clothing, and their circle of social acquaintances. Life quickly became like walking on thin ice over the abyss of complete social oblivion. The maids were well aware of the importance of preserving the good name of their noble mistresses. They became loyal guardians of their reputation, carefully hiding any compromising facts from prying eyes. Failed secret romances, financial difficulties, or family quarrels remained a closely guarded secret. The servants understood perfectly well that the fall of their mistress would inevitably lead to the dismissal of the entire household staff. Their silence was dictated not only by loyalty, but also by the banal instinct of self-preservation. Particular pressure was exerted on young unmarried women from wealthy and very influential families. Their main task in life was to make a profitable marriage in order to increase the family's financial capital. Each of their public appearances was evaluated by strict matrons in terms of potential social usefulness. Maids quickly learned to recognize gossip and protect their mistresses from its poisonous and destructive influence. They intercepted strange anonymous letters and did not allow people with dubious reputations to enter the house. This secret, invisible front required incredible insight and enormous life wisdom from the servants. Maintaining the facade of absolute well-being required incredible effort and tremendous daily acting skills. Spouses who secretly hated each other demonstrated perfect love and complete family harmony in public. Women smiled radiantly, hiding behind their fans the traces of recent tears or sleepless, difficult nights. This incredible constant lying exhausted the nervous system, leading to frequent and severe nervous breakdowns. Maids secretly treated these breakdowns with herbal infusions and complete understanding, sincere, warm silence. The high price of perfection was always paid with deep inner loneliness and the loss of one's true self. The rare women who dared to challenge the system became outcasts, forever losing their rightful place. The vast majority preferred to endure, hiding their pain behind layers of expensive silk and lace. This quiet and completely invisible tragedy of an entire generation of women remained unseen against the backdrop of sparkling historical grandeur. In the era before the advent of the first telephones, paper letters and short notes remained the main means of communication. Writing long letters was an important part of the daily routine of any noble lady in a wealthy mansion. Women spent long hours at elegant mahogany writing desks, producing calligraphic lines of text. These paper letters were often the only way to express their true feelings and deep inner experiences. Paper silently endured what could not be said aloud within the walls of a huge, cold house. These secret messages were cries for help from women locked in a golden cage of strict social conventions. The maids who regularly dusted the writing desks were well aware of the existence of these secret personal paper archives. The maids also sometimes wrote letters to their families, who remained in distant, poor, provincial villages. In these rare messages, they described the luxury of the huge houses, trying to reassure their anxious elderly parents. They rarely complained about the hard work, the cold in the small rooms, or the rudeness of the senior staff. For the devoted servants, letters were the only link connecting them to their past and their loved ones. However, postage was very expensive, and these messages were sent extremely rarely and very sparingly. The postman who brought the morning mail was one of the most eagerly awaited people in the huge, wealthy house. The letters were neatly arranged on a silver tray and solemnly brought into the room to the noble mistress who had just woken up. The maids were incredibly strict about ensuring that drafts did not fall into the hands of envious, ill-willed neighbors. They carefully checked the pockets of dresses before washing them, returning forgotten notes to their rightful, anxious owners. This constant vigilance saved more than one reputation in the cruel world of high society during the Gilded Age. Words that were never spoken aloud remained forever imprinted on old, fragile paper. They tell the true story of female loneliness much more eloquently than historical chronicles and boring textbooks. The maids who secretly burned these letters were the last guardians of these small but very important tragedies. Their incredible loyalty to other people's secrets deserves enormous respect and preservation in our long human memory. The wealth of the Age of Splendor has always captured the imagination with its scale and incredible display of luxury. The mansions were very much like real palaces, with marble staircases, crystal chandeliers, and gilded moldings on the ceilings. However, for the intelligent women who lived within these walls, this luxury often became a beautiful prison. They were completely unable to go out freely without being accompanied by a companion or a loyal senior maid. Their every movement was strictly limited by the rules of propriety and the status of their influential wealthy spouses. The only outlet allowed for many wealthy ladies was active charity work and participation in boards of trustees. This gave them the pleasant illusion of usefulness and the opportunity to briefly escape from the confines of their stifling homes. They organized fundraisers, attended charity balls, and helped the poor residents of the city's dirty outskirts. However, even these activities were strictly regulated and had to correspond to their high social status. Any deviation from accepted standards threatened immediate condemnation from conservative, strict society. Taking care of one's health became another important reason for legally leaving the huge house. Visiting fashionable thermal spas was considered a mandatory ritual for ladies from the wealthy upper class. These trips were planned several long months in advance and required the preparation of a huge number of new travel outfits. Maids carefully packed endless, heavy trunks in preparation for a difficult, exhausting, long, and complicated journey. At the spas, women could afford a little more freedom of communication away from strict home control. The golden cage proved to be much stronger than steel bars because it was built from invisible social conventions. It ruthlessly broke their will, suppressed their desires, and forced women to live empty lives imposed on them by others. Wealth did not bring them happiness at all, but only adorned their suffering with expensive silks and sparkling diamonds. The story of these unfortunate women teaches us to value freedom of choice and independence above any material wealth. The maids who silently observed this life from within learned a very important and cruel lesson. They understood perfectly well that true freedom lies within a person, not in their huge bank account. Their hard, exhausting work was honest. Unlike the false existence of their unfortunate noble mistresses, this simple wisdom helped them maintain their human dignity in the most difficult circumstances and deprivations. The whole complex system of life in luxurious mansions was based on one unspoken but absolute rule: complete silence. Absolutely everyone had to be silent, from the junior dishwasher in the basement to the hostess in the formal living room. Words always had the destructive power to destroy reputations, families, and long-established social connections. Therefore, women quickly learned to communicate with glances, gestures, and hints, hiding their true thoughts deep inside. This culture of silence permeated the very walls of old houses, making them deaf to people's quiet grief. For poor maids, silence was the main condition for keeping their jobs and the roof over their heads. They constantly saw the underside of wealth: family scandals, financial collapses, betrayals, and serious, incurable secret illnesses. Any careless words spoken outside the huge house could lead to immediate and cruel dismissal. With age, the habit of silence became second nature, deeply and permanently ingrained in the complex female character. Older women completely lost the ability to openly express their feelings, even to their closest relatives. They withdrew deep into themselves, spending their days in the absolute silence of their empty and cold, luxurious bedrooms. The house was filled with the ghosts of unspoken important words and strong and sincere human emotions that were not expressed in time. This ringing silence was heavier than any noise, weighing on their fragile shoulders with an invisible leaden burden. Personal diaries were the only place where the vow of silence could be broken without fear of severe punishment. Women entrusted their most terrible secrets to thick paper, hiding small notebooks in secret drawers in their desks. After their departure, these diaries were often destroyed by relatives in order to preserve the ideal image of the family's glorious past. The Age of Splendor is gone forever, leaving behind only beautiful museums and empty cold walls. but the silence of these mansions still carefully preserves the memory of those who lived in them. An attentive listener can always hear in this silence the whispers of women whose voices were unjustly stolen. Their instructive story teaches us that the right to speak is the greatest value that must be cherished. The fates of the maids and noble mistresses of the Age of Splendor were strangely intertwined by invisible, strong threads of suffering. The huge mansions, dazzling with gold, were in fact places of deep loneliness and suppressed female emotions. Behind every luxurious facade, there were always hidden tears, hard work, and a huge price paid for an impeccable reputation. This story reminds us how important it is to value the right to our own voice and freedom of choice. Suggest topics for future videos you would like to see in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to our channel.